Hi, welcome to another episode of the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm Steve Richardson, a bankruptcy attorney trying to keep people on their path to financial stability and independence through education. President Trump's efforts to downsize the federal government through the Department of Government Efficiency has a lot of federal workers nervous. Many of them have built a career with the government and spent years in public service. The thought of transitioning to the private sector, should they receive a pink slip, can be very stressful. That's why in this episode of the podcast, I bring back certified career coach Bonnie Negron to talk about the best and most effective ways to find the right job in the private sector as quickly as possible to stay on track to financial freedom. My guest today is Bonnie Negron, the CEO of Bonnie Career Services. She's an executive leadership award winner and is certified as a career, life, and leadership coach, professional resume writer, online profile expert, and behavioral consultant. She has been featured in the HuffPost, Monster, and NJ Mom media outlets. For nearly 20 years, Bonnie has interviewed, hired, trained, mentored, and partnered with individuals at all corporate America levels while holding leadership roles in administration, IT, human resources, operations, project management, and finance. She was also my guest on episode 140 to talk about the Great Resignation. But today, she's here to talk about federal workers facing possible layoff and how they can transition to the private sector for new employment. Welcome back to the show, Bonnie.
Oh, thank you so much, Steve. Happy for you having me here today.
Yeah, it's going to be good. All right, so a lot of federal workers out there are very nervous right now with the government downsizing being conducted by President Trump. There were a lot of probationary workers that have been laid off, and then they're coming back because the courts determined that not to be legal. But there's a lot of flux going on, a lot of pink slips going out to different people in different agencies.
Mhm.
So, for those that are worried about whether the axe will fall on them, what's the first thing they should be doing just in case?
Yeah, I mean, I will say thank you for asking this. This is a big question that's going on right now in our economy. And the biggest mistake is waiting for the worst to happen. So if there's even a chance that you might be affected with all of these changes, you need to start preparing yesterday. So definitely pull out your resume. And, the question is like, when was the last time you've even updated it? You have to be in a position now where you can access like where your skills can translate beyond the federal system. So you have to start thinking about your accomplishments, what you've done, and really getting those career tools in place. That is the biggest thing right now. And ask yourself, if you are, if there is a chance that you could be getting a pink slip and you're not sure what to do, this is a really great place to start. And you want to ask yourself, like, what is it that you want other organizations and hiring managers to know about you immediately? Like if they're looking at your resume or they're looking at your LinkedIn profile, because I will tell you that the answer to that question is going to solve how your resume should be written for the private sector and the type of skills and the duties that make the most sense.
So, concentrate on, before you start writing about it in your resume, start concentrating on your accomplishments, what you have done in your career. And we know use a lot of action words when you're talking about it, about what you accomplished, not just what you did, but
Mhm.
what you accomplished in that position and how you advanced and that sort of thing. So sort of um, focusing on your assets first, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the difference between a federal CV and a private sector resume is the fact that you don't have to list everything that you've done. You don't even need to include your salary level or anything like that. You only need to use what's relevant to where you want to go. So that is the big takeaway. So really focusing not on the day-to-day stuff, but the career accomplishments. And the next thing you want to start thinking about is tapping into your network. I mean, that is something you need to start doing discreetly, because relationships, not applications, will definitely move you faster in today's job market. And so bottom line, you got to get ahead of it before you're forced to. And if you're not on LinkedIn, now is the time to get on there, because I do know there are some federal agencies that prefer you not to have a LinkedIn account. But there's definitely ways that you can create a LinkedIn profile that doesn't have all of the details on there, but that positions you for opportunities that may not necessarily be posted online or made public. LinkedIn is definitely the place to be if you're looking to make a career change.
Well, for people that are career federal employees that may have been uh, with their agency or with various federal agencies for 10, 15, 20 years, they may not have a private sector network to reach
Hmm.
out to.
Exactly.
How do they start identifying people to build that network in the private sector?
Yeah, so first thing is you need to know what your end goal is. Like what are the organizations that you would work for in the private sector, and
Mhm.
start there. See, most people will start with their resume and they'll start thinking about the job title, when in actuality it should be in the reverse. It should be, what are the type of organizations that you want to work for? And then you see like what are the divisions they have, the titles, because job titles today are so all over the place. There really is no, in the private sector. I mean, you can have a chief happiness officer, which is the same thing as an HR manager. So to stick with just an HR manager role, let's say, for example, you might be losing out on opportunities or not realizing that you have the skills for other titles that you haven't even considered. So rule of thumb is definitely start with the type of companies you would want to work for, the industries that you want to be in, because the best resumes are written towards a specific industry, not necessarily towards a specific role, because job titles can vary when you go from one company to another.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned LinkedIn as far as
Mhm.
being one way to build that network. There are
Absolutely.
a lot of industries and businesses and things like that that themselves, as opposed to individuals, have a presence on LinkedIn. Um, are besides LinkedIn, as you said, some federal agencies, they're still employed and they don't want to get in trouble as far as a social media presence on LinkedIn. Are there any other networks or places they can go online that might help them build that network?
Well, you have other social channels. You have, your Facebook, which has a lot of private groups that you can network and intermingle. You don't even need to disclose where you're working currently. So Facebook and LinkedIn are typically the top two places for online social networking. If you want to go offline, you have to think about the professional affiliations that are aligned with your experience. So, like, for example, if you're a project manager and you then maybe joining the Project Management Institute and start, become a member. Most professional affiliations will give you like guest passes to be able to attend one or two events, and you can start intermingling with people in person. So that's typically the best way to get started on building a network. But when you start with the industry and company first, then from there you can identify the type of people and the roles that they're in. Too many people go directly to the people and the roles and not start at the top. So I always recommend, like, once you know the industry and the type of companies that you want to work for, from there it's very easy. It's easier to identify which individuals within that particular organization that you should start networking with.
Mhm. Well, so you want to look at the industry, and obviously, what eight federal agency you worked for will determine the kind of industries you're looking at. Could you give us some examples just for the listeners as far as what you're talking about? Just to get people started thinking.
Yeah, I mean, so um Lil, give me what's one area that people work in the federal government?
Well, I don't know to what extent all of the law enforcement agencies are going
Mhm.
to be affected by this. I know President Trump has some, you know, protected agencies, whether it's military or national security or things like that, that he's or not like immigration and everything that he's not going to touch. But I don't know to what extent uh, other law enforcement agencies are affected.
Mhm.
Supposedly, the FBI also got the Elon Musk five bullet point
Yeah.
email on what did you do last week. So they're at least looking at the FBI. So,
Yeah.
there's that. Uh, there are, I mean, I guess the the Office of Personal Management for HR,
Hmm.
Office of Budgeting, things like that. All sorts of different federal agencies.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to. Sometimes it can help the listeners if we have some examples to get an idea of how to transition their thinking.
Yeah, so that, if they've been in those agencies are large agencies, so they could be in different roles within that agency. They can be in an HR and a finance and an IT role. Even in FBI, there's a lot of FBI law enforcement professionals that I've worked with that transition into all different fields. It just really depends. They've gone into IT, they've gone into banking, maybe fraud, and risk that a lot of these corporate agencies have. But so that's where, really understanding where a person is important to understanding like where they can go. But the good news is they have a lot of opportunities. They don't have to feel that because they've only worked in federal that they can't transfer it to the private sector. They sure can. But it is a loaded question to and it's one that I hear all the time, like, what can I do? And, there's really no blanket answer because it depends on these factors that we're talking about. It's not just about matching your skills to a job description. You have to look at the full picture. What type of salary are you targeting? Are you limited by geographic location or open to remote opportunities? What are your non-negotiables, work environment, leadership level, industry preferences? And then kind of get down to what are those transferable skills that you have that you bring to the table. So I always tell in federal employees that are looking to pivot to the private sector to first strip away their job title and just focus on those core competencies.
Mhm.
Are you leading teams? Are you managing multi-million dollar budgets? Are you solving operational bottlenecks? Are you working in HR, finance, IT, operations, or another specialized area? And once you have that clarity on the transferable skills and the big picture, then that's a perfect time for you to be able to do a gap analysis, compare roles in the private sector to see where your experience overlaps and where you might need to sharpen certain skills or gain certifications. That might be the route that some of these employees might have to take in order to be competitive and comparable to other candidates who already have the private sector experience, right?
Mhm. And looking at as far as salary requirements and things like that, one of the big differences between public and private employment is often benefits. The benefits can be better, and that's usually the with of the three: job security, income, and benefits. You may not get the income of the private sector, but you often have the benefits and the job security that go
Exactly.
with public employment. So it's not just salary levels; it's trying to compare uh, uh, benefit packages,
Yeah.
different types of health insurance, dental insurance, life insurance, uh, retirement packages.
Yeah.
If you're in
Vacation
the federal
time.
system, right?
Yeah.
If you're in the federal system,
Mhm.
you probably are in the thrift savings plan, their version of the 401k. You would need to roll that over. But what is offered by the employer? Do they have a 401k? Do they have a pension program or annuity program or whatever it is? And what kind of coverage is offered by their health insurance? Is it
Exactly.
comparable?
Absolutely. And so that's why I just think like, you may be in like the office of personnel management, but that means you can go in almost into any industry. All of these other factors have to be considered. And one rule of thumb that I use when working with clients is make sure you're at least 80% qualified for the role. That's also a key part of it. But when it comes to understanding like what are the type of roles, it's not a one size fits all solution. Your career story, your goals, your strengths are all unique in determining like what would be the next best step for you.
Yeah, and one good example is that as you were talking, I was thinking I gave the example of the FBI. Well, it's not necessarily law enforcement. I mean, if you are in the cyber crimes unit, well, then go into IT or security, or if
Yeah.
you're into, you know, counterterrorism or counterintelligence, or one of the many different uh, sections of the FBI divisions
Hmm.
that have require different skill sets.
Right.
So you're looking at different. Another area that's definitely being hit is the IRS. They're
Yeah.
looking to pare back thousands of jobs and have already laid off a lot of people. Uh,
So you can go into audit or risk at some of the big four companies. I mean, the opportunities are endless, which, that's the good part of it, right? It's just a matter of how do you position yourself and what are the roles that make the most sense for you based on all of these other things that are part of your lifestyle too, and your big picture, the benefits, the paid time off, and all of that. But, I do have for those who need some help with this, because again, it's customized. It's not, if we had somebody on here that was telling me their exact story, their experience, where they work, we'd be able to fine tune and dive deeper into like, okay, these are the type of companies and stuff. Like this is exactly what I do with my clients, but without having some of that finer detail, like it's hard to say specifically. But speaking of Facebook groups we talked about before, I do have my private Facebook community. It's called the Career Shakeup Club. And inside, for those who want to join, they get immediate access to resources that almost are like quizzes and worksheets to help them identify like how to make this career change, and a checklist to help them start a transition into the private sector like in under 90 days. So if you are stuck and you're not quite sure and you want to make sure that you're not leaving any options on the table, these are tactical tools that can help you to break it down step by step. This is something that I've developed for people.
okay. All right.
Yes.
So we've talked about types of jobs and what you should be doing right now to play some good defense. Uh, so we talked earlier about their updating their resume,
Mhm.
and and as you pointed out, it's a very different process. If there, a lot of times you may have a federal employee who moves from agency to agency. My wife has talked about that, where they are applying for positions, uh, either a higher position within their own agency or a position in a different one. But the resume process is very different. And if they've been career federal employees, it's very different in the private sector. How should they start structuring and putting together a resume for the private sector as opposed to the public sector?
Yeah, great question. Great question, Stephen. So, first thing, understand, like you said, a private sector resume is a whole different ballgame compared to a federal resume, because federal resumes tend to be long, detailed, they're packed with government specific jargon. Now, in the private sector, that's not going to work. Employers aren't looking for a full rundown of every duty you've had or your salary history. They just want to know how you deliver impact and if you would be a great fit for, their organization. So here's where many federal employees sometimes make a mistake, is because they forget to speak in the language of the role that they're trying to land,
Mhm.
because they're so accustomed to the role that they've been in. And you can't copy and paste your federal job description. I mean, you need to be able to translate your skills into business terms. At the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to, focusing on results, aligning your resume to the private sector priority. So this is where I tell my clients, go to the job boards and do job shopping to see like what is it that they're looking for? How are they speaking about certain initiatives within their organizations, the type of projects, what you'd be running. And you want to take your federal experience and speak that language, even if it's not how you would speak about it in your current role. That's important. And this is where some people get stuck with creating the resume. But now the good thing is you have tools, like you can use Chat GPT to help you brainstorm transferable skills, or even break down the job description compared to your job description in the federal role. But I want to warn you with that, like don't use it verbatim. You'll sound like everyone else, and your resume will blend in, when the goal of a private sector resume is actually to stand out. So you can at least use it to help you identify the transferable skills, but it's important that you're not using it to sound like everybody else.
Exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously, you indicated that with the federal employment, the resumes are a lot longer,
Mm-hmm.
and that just doesn't work in the private sector.
Yeah.
Um, what is, I guess, the TMI point? When is a private sector resume too long? You know, the expression now TLDR, too long, didn't read. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
when do employers stop
Yeah.
reading? And
Yeah, you
what
see,
should be their limit on the information in a resume?
that's another great question because, it really depends. I mean, your resume is a marketing tool. It's not a legal document, but so you have to use what's relevant. And I think, I mean, the rule of thumb, there is one rule of thumb in our resume writing industry, is that if you do have less than 5 years of experience, a one pager should be good. But anything over that, 2 pages is the norm. However, I've written 3 page resumes before if it needs to tell the full story. So, I mean, if you've been an accountant for 20 years and you've only worked with one agency, then maybe you can get away with 1 or 2 pages. But if you've moved and pivoted from accountant to risk and compliance and to other areas, and you have publications and awards that you've won, then it might make sense to have 3 pages. I've written a lot of 3 pages for those who've been more in the technical space. They have a lot of certifications. If they've been in project management, they have a lot of projects. So again, it just depends. But the average is 2 pages. You may need to go 3 pages. It just really depends on does it make sense for the role that you're targeting? Now, it's not just about the human reader, because today what you also need to be have some education on as you go into the private sector is applicant tracking systems. That's a big thing. In the federal government, they primarily use systems like USA Jobs or apply on their website. But in the private sector, you're dealing with applicant tracking systems, and these are robust tools that can be customized. There's over 200 types of applicant tracking system softwares on the market. All the private sector companies are using them, and it's your resume is going to be parsed through that system. Okay, so a resume that gets picked up by one company system, it may not even make it past another's filters if you don't have the right formatting and keywords. So, in addition to having a resume that's, got a powerful presentation, that makes you stand out, that's easy to read, that's well structured, it could be the best written resume. But if it's not ATS compatible or compliant, then it's not even going to get seen by a hiring manager. So that's another area that you want to equip yourself with. Just go online and Google or LinkedIn and look up like applicant tracking systems. What are some of the key things that I need to know about it as you go, into this job search? And it's going to be really important that you equip yourself with understanding how ATS works so that you don't, waste a lot of time just getting rejections when you apply online.
Well, that raises a good question as far as the application process. I mean,
hmm
is your when you say a 2 or 3 page resume, are we talking about a PDF that you then submit to the employer, or is it information that gets put into an online form and fed to ATS or one of these systems? What's the
Yeah,
application
it's
process
both.
look like?
Yeah, it's both. So, when you apply online, you're going to have to submit a Word or PDF. Either would suffice. But you're also going to have to fill out an application. And so, that's just part of the process. And all of that is your application, both what you upload and what you're inputting into the details of their form.
Mhm. Is there much that differs? I guess it depends on the company, what's in their application form. But we've talked about resumes and different sections of the resume. What kind of information in general are these application forms looking for that differs from what might be on a resume?
Yeah, so I think, the biggest thing is that um, the what the application process looks like is you may have to do more than that. You may have to do personality tests. You may have to submit projects. Um, I mean, these are all part of an application can sometimes take you up to an hour just to complete for one job. So
Hmm.
it's not like the federal system where you upload your resume and then you can apply to different jobs
Hmm.
based on that one application or resume. You will have to set up different uh, accounts basically on the different companies that you're going to be applying for.
Hmm. Okay. So let's talk about, we've talked about how to identify the kinds of jobs you want to look for, how to build a network. in the private sector to find those opportunities
Mhm.
and how to put together a proper resume and do the application. But what what's the job market looking like today? There you hear about companies, several rounds of interviews at different levels, depending on how far you get. Uh, how long should people expect it to take on average to find another job? Once they've gotten their federal pink slip.
Yeah, yeah. So you hit it on the nail. The market is competitive, yes, but opportunities are out there for those that know how to position themselves and tap into the hidden job market. That's a key thing that we haven't talked about, but I want to bring it up because just relying on online job applications that actually creates the longest time that it will take somebody to find a role. For mid to senior level roles, those who have at least 10, 15, 20, 25 years of experience, if you're doing this on your own and for the first time, the average job search is taking people anywhere from 6 to 12 months just to land a role, or sometimes even just to get an interview.
Mhm. That's a long period of time to be unemployed, 6 to 12 months just to get a
Yes.
first interview.
Yes, yes. I mean, because there's so many moving pieces at play right now. You have the applicant tracking systems, needing to network, job boards, simply knowing how to stand out through your resume and your LinkedIn profile. I mean, without having a clear end goal. So the key is that you need to have a strategy going in. Just having a resume that's too broad, that you're applying to anything and everything, is also a cycle that puts people in this job search for longer than necessary. So
Mhm.
the key is really having a strategy, knowing the type of roles that you can apply for, ensuring that your resume and LinkedIn speak to where you want to go and that they're polished and differentiate you as a top candidate in your field. I mean, this is exactly what we do for our clients, and that's how with what we're doing is we're cutting that time in half or more. Our clients are landing role in as little as 6 weeks to 4 months. It would really depend on the hiring cycle of the organization because, like you mentioned, sometimes you can go on 2 rounds and nail the offer. Sometimes you have to go on 8, 9 rounds of interviews. And we're
Mhm.
talking about virtual interviews, screenings, in person, panel interviews with multiple people in the room. So it does take a lot of time. And especially when there's still a lot of remote work that is happening right now, even though you're hearing a lot about this return to office in the news media today. The fact of the matter is that corporations do have access to a lot more of a broader candidate pool than ever before. And so it's taking them longer to make a decision. So with what we do is we help clients get that clarity and we eliminate a lot of the guesswork of trying to, revamp your resume multiple times and just to help them avoid making the common mistake that job seekers make when they're trying to do this on their own. I mean, that's the biggest thing. But speaking with, I speak with thousands of job seekers every year. Now I've just been speaking with so many before elections, after the new administration came in, and this is their biggest challenge. And yes, I'm hearing people are going as long as 6 to 12 months before they can even get an interview.
So it seems to me that the more you stand out and the more targeted you are in your search, the higher the likelihood you're going to shorten that period of time between layoff and getting that new job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you know what you want, you have a game plan, you have a roadmap. That makes it easier for you to know the type of companies, the people at that company you want to target. If you're just starting with a blank slate and just, I'll take whatever I can, there's no strategy behind that. And so you're just throwing this resume or, throwing spaghetti at the wall, like that saying goes, to see what sticks. That is the worst way to land a job. And most people that come to me, they've already gone through that and they're like, I just don't know what else to do. And so this is where, if you're finding yourself in that cycle, it means that you just don't have a strategy and you need to have a strategy before you even start the career documents. It's important. So, this is what's really important. No matter if you're any career pivot that you're trying to make in your career, you need to have a game plan in order to be successful and to shorten the amount of time that you're in a job search trying to make that change.
So it sounds like now, I mean, if you're worrying about the axe falling, you haven't gotten your pink slip yet. Going back to my initial question, this is what you need to do while you still have that federal job is you
Yep.
need to come up with a strategy. You need to know and be targeted where, like I said, uh, figuring out what kind of jobs you want, honing that resume to match up with that type of job rather than being a very generic resume. And also, as the saying goes, it's not what you know, it's who you know. There are jobs that might be advertised, but many more people that might be just looking, or you know someone in your network who can then recommend you. That can also, like I said, going back to that network, help you shorten that time period, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, a lot of ways that you can do this online by yourself. It really boils down to, how much time do you have? If you're not too worried and you have some time, there's definitely starting with LinkedIn is a key place. I mean, even follow me on LinkedIn, join my community and get tons of access to free resources. I mean, I've had people who've never even worked with me directly, but use all the tools and strategies that I share in my community. And through my book, Career Shakeup, I actually wrote a book about this. And they were able to make the career move that they wanted by doing it themselves. So, you could still start moving the needle today if you have a little bit of time. But if you're like, I just want the support, I always recommend just get in the rooms with people that can help you fast track this because when you need a couple of months to figure this out, to get all your documents in order, your LinkedIn, then you start applying, then you have to start going on interviews. You see how it could take some time from beginning to end. And so if you only got like 30 days, like I said, when we started talking, you needed to start preparing yesterday for
Mm-hmm.
this cycle.
Exactly. So we'll have in the listeners out there, we'll have in the show notes the link, the various links that Bonnie's talking about as far as her resources and everything else, and that can be a good place to start. Uh, but if folks go through these resources and they're starting to work on it, I understand that you have a particular program that is targeted specifically to federal workers, people trying to make this big transition from the public sector to the private sector. Tell us
Yeah.
about what this program is you have just for federal workers and how you can help them specifically.
Yeah, so in my career shakeup program, we just walk you through the entire process. We do all of the heavy lifting to develop your career document tailored for private sector roles. We identify the transferable skills and help position you clearly. That's important. We have you take assessments. We really work with you to understand and make sure that we're not leaving any money or opportunities on the table. And then I help guide them to the roles and industries that would make the most sense for them based on their lifestyle and their goals and show them exactly how to tap into that hidden job market and build a network, even if they don't have a network at all, because that is where the real opportunities lie. So, if you're, I will say this, don't wait until you're out of a job to start figuring this out. If you're in a position to align yourself with mentors like me and my team who can accelerate this for you, that's definitely the best move because once the job is gone and there's no income, I see so many people scared to invest. And then by then, time and options are already limited. So I can't stress enough to be proactive and
Mhm.
not reactive when it comes to your career and your job.
Well, I think that this is just the purpose of this episode is to help federal workers be proactive. A lot of times, action is often the antidote to stress. If you're worried about that axe falling, taking action and moving forward, like I said, while you have the income and the money to go through the expense of you're working with them and helping them, that now's the time to move forward. You mentioned a book as well. Tell us a little about the book and where folks can get a copy of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my book is Career Shakeup. I literally wrote the playbook on taking back control of your career. My book Career Shakeup walks you through step by step. You can grab a copy anytime at careershakeupbook.com. You can also find it on Amazon as well. We have the print version and the ebook version, but it will help you to get crystal clear on your transferable skills. I also have like some exclusive downloads and worksheets just to get you thinking about the areas that you need to consider when you're making a change like this from one sector to the other. And just so that you can help to build a strong career brand. Some people have an idea, and I will say that the biggest mistake I see, the reason why I created the Career Shakeup program and wrote the book on this exact process is because one of the biggest mistakes that I typically see is assuming that someone else's career path will work for them. And you want to know that just because a family friend, a neighbor, a former colleague landed in a certain role, that doesn't mean it's the right move for you. Everybody has unique skills and goals and non-negotiables. So blindly following someone else's trajectory, it usually leads to frustration, settling for something beneath your value, and then maybe finding yourself in a role that 3 months into it, you're like, this is not for me, and you have to go into this exhausting job search all over again. So the key is not to make a jump, not to follow somebody else's path, but really to figure out, what is the best path for you, and that way you can ensure that the next move is the right move for the long term, and you haven't settled.
Great. All right. Well, folks, all of this information will be in the show notes to check out. And if you're watching the video version of this as released, it'll all be in the description of the video. And be sure to reach out to Bonnie if you think she can help you in transitioning if you do get that pink slip. But even then, even before it, maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe you don't get a pink slip. Maybe you're able to continue your job. But having this in your back pocket and knowing that you have a plan B and an action plan should the axe fall is going to, at the very least, reduce your stress and make working in your federal agency a lot more pleasant if you're not worrying about what happens next if you lose that job.
That's right.
So, thanks for coming on to the show, Bonnie, and I'm sure you can. It's been information been very helpful to listeners from right now, and I'm sure you can help them even more if they reach out to you.
Absolutely. Yes. And if they book a complimentary career chat with me before April 11, 2025, and mention this podcast episode, I will send you a free copy of our book.
Sounds terrific.
Yep.
All right, Bonnie.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye bye.